The sun filters through the sheer curtains of my study window, casting a warm glow over the stacks of yellowed lesson plans, faded construction paper cards from decades of students, and the old oak desk that's been with me since my first classroom in 1962. I'm Margaret Ellison, though generations of children, and now their children, called me Mrs. Ellie. I'm 89 years old, a retired school teacher from San Francisco, where I spent 47 years teaching 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades in public schools across the city. I've graded thousands of spelling tests, wiped away countless tears, celebrated hundreds of graduations, and watched the world change from slide rules to smartphones. My husband, David, a history professor, passed 12 years ago. Our 2 sons are grown, one in Chicago with a law practice, the other in Dallas running a nonprofit. The grandchildren visit when they can, but the house is mostly quiet now, filled with books, memories, and the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock David restored. If you're watching this, perhaps you're a teacher nearing retirement, or a parent wondering what legacy really means, or someone my age reflecting on a long life. Please hit that like button and subscribe. My youngest grandson helped me start this channel because he said the world needs to hear what an old teacher has learned about legacy after 80, not the bucket list cliches or the adventure brochures, but the real, sometimes painful truths that nobody talks about. So here we are. I'm going to share 5 surprising truths about building a legacy after 80. These aren't about climbing mountains or sailing oceans, though those are fine if you want them. They're about what actually lasts when your time is short and your body is slowing down. First truth: regrets almost always stem from words left unspoken, not trips left untaken. We're sold this idea that a meaningful life is measured by experiences, skydiving at 70, seeing the northern lights, checking off a list. But in all my years teaching and living, I've learned that the deepest regrets come from silence. Let me tell you about Evelyn, a former colleague of mine who taught English at Mission High until she was 78. Evelyn was vibrant, traveled every summer, collected stamps from 50 countries, had photos of herself on safaris and glaciers. She retired with a long bucket list still half finished. In her early 80s, her health declined quickly. Heart issues, then a stroke. In the memory care facility, she rarely mentioned the places she hadn't seen. Instead, she wept about her estranged sister. They had had a falling out in 1985 over their mother's estate, something trivial about furniture. Neither ever apologized. The sister died in 2010, and Evelyn carried that silence like a stone. In her final months, she kept saying, "I should have called. I should have said I was sorry. I should have told her I loved her anyway." The unfinished travels didn't haunt her. The unfinished conversation did. Now contrast that with Robert, a parent volunteer I knew from Jefferson Elementary in the 90s. Robert was a quiet man, worked as a mechanic, never left California, no grand adventures. But when his daughter came out as gay in 1988, at a time when that was still dangerous in many circles, Robert drove to her apartment, hugged her, and said, "You are my daughter, and I love you exactly as you are. Nothing changes that." It was hard for him. He'd grown up in a conservative family, but he said the words. His daughter told me years later, at Robert's funeral in 2022, that those words were her anchor through every storm. Robert died peacefully at 87, surrounded by family. No one mentioned missing trips. They talked about the words he'd spoken, the love he'd shown. I have my own regrets in this area. There was a student, Marcus, in my 1972 4th grade class. Bright boy, but troubled home life. I saw the signs of neglect, reported it, but when he moved mid-year, I never followed up. I meant to write, to check in, but life got busy. Decades later, at a school reunion, an adult Marcus found me. He'd had a hard road, foster care, struggles, but he'd become a social worker helping kids like he'd been. He hugged me and said, "Mrs. Ellie, you were the first adult who noticed me. That mattered." I cried
because I realized I'd never told him how proud I was, how often I'd thought of him. I told him then, at 82, and he said it still meant everything. Don't wait. Say the words now. Love, apology, gratitude, pride. They outlast any passport stamp. Second truth, mentoring young people renews purpose more than any personal achievement ever could. After 80, the temptation is to turn inward, rest, reflect, retreat. But I've seen the opposite bring light back into dimming eyes. Take Gloria, a retired librarian I met through the senior center here in the Sunset District. Gloria was 84, widowed, arthritic, living alone. She'd had a distinguished career, awards on her wall, but felt irrelevant. Then a local middle school asked for volunteers to tutor reading. Gloria hesitated. I'm too old, too slow, but went anyway. She was paired with a shy 7th grader named Sophia, who struggled with dyslexia. Week after week, Gloria sat with her, patient, encouraging, sharing tricks she'd learned over decades. Sophia's reading improved dramatically. By the end of the year, Sophia read a poem aloud at the school assembly and dedicated it to Miss Gloria, who believed in me when I didn't. Gloria told me later, tears streaming, I thought my useful days were over, but seeing that girl stand tall, it gave me a reason to get up every morning. Gloria lived to 92, and Sophia spoke at her memorial. Then there's Harold, a former principal I knew from the district. Harold retired at 65, played golf, traveled, did all the right things. By 82, he was bored, depressed, drinking too much. His wife worried. He refused mentoring. I've done my time with kids. His health declined. He passed at 85, quietly bitter. No one at his service mentioned his golf handicap. They wished he'd found purpose again.
I started mentoring myself at 75, after David died. I volunteered with a literacy program for immigrant adults. My first student was Lynn, a Vietnamese grandmother learning English to read to her grandchildren. We met weekly at the library. I taught her phonics. She taught me how to make pho. When Lynn read her first full book aloud to me, an Anne children's story, she cried. So did I. Now, at 89, I can't go in person anymore, but I tutor via Zoom. Grandchildren of former students, young teachers needing encouragement. Their questions, their growth, their gratitude, it's oxygen to me. If you're past 80 and feeling the world has moved on without you, find one young person to guide. It doesn't have to be formal. Listen, share wisdom, believe in them. It will renew you more than any cruise. Third truth, forgiving old family feuds frees you more than it frees them. At our age, carrying grudges is like dragging chains. I knew a couple, Arthur and Beatrice, married 62 years. Arthur's brother Samuel had borrowed money in 1968 for a business that failed, never repaid it. It caused a rift, decades of cold holidays, no contact. When Samuel died in 2015, Arthur refused to attend the funeral. He owed me, he said. Beatrice begged him to let it go. Arthur held firm. By 2020, Arthur was 88, dementia creeping in. In his clearer moments, he'd mutter about Samuel, angry still. It poisoned his final years. Beatrice told me privately, I wish he'd forgiven. It would have given him peace. Then there's my dear friend Ruth in Chicago, 87 now. Ruth hadn't spoken to her daughter Karen in 15 years. Argument over Karen's divorce, harsh words on both sides. Ruth carried the pain daily. At 85, Ruth wrote a letter. No blame, just love and apology for her part. Karen called, sobbing. They reconciled. Now they talk weekly, visit when they can. Ruth says, forgiving her and myself lifted a weight I didn't know I was carrying. I sleep better than I have in years. I had my own feud with my older son, Jonathan, over his career choices. He wanted art school. David and I pushed law. Harsh words when he chose art anyway. Distance grew. At 83, I called him.
I was wrong to judge your path. I'm proud of the man and artist you became. Silence, then tears. We've healed slowly. The forgiveness freed me to enjoy the time we have left.
Let go of the old hurts. Write the letter, make the call. Even if they don't respond, the act frees you. Fourth truth. Material wealth matters far less than shared stories when legacy is measured. We're taught to build financial security for our heirs, but I've seen money divide more often than unite. Take Walter, a successful developer I knew through the PTA. Walter built a small fortune, left millions split between 3 children. After his death at 86, the siblings fought over the vacation home, the art collection, unequal shares they perceived, lawsuits, estranged relationships. Walter's wealth became a wedge. Contrast with my colleague Dorothy, who taught kindergarten for 50 years on a modest salary. Dorothy had little to leave financially, but she'd recorded stories, audio tapes of herself reading favorite books, telling family history, sharing life lessons. She gave copies to each grandchild. After Dorothy passed at 90, the family gathered and played those tapes. Laughter, tears, connection. No one fought over money because there wasn't much. They cherished the stories, her voice, her love. I've started recording my own stories, memories of teaching during desegregation, the moon landing day in class, David's proposal. Not for money, but for voice. It's what will remain. Fifth truth. Choosing quality time over quantity in healthcare decisions preserves dignity. Doctors often push for more treatment, more years, but at 80 plus, more years can mean more suffering. I watched dear friend Philip, 85, diagnosed with advanced prostate cancer. Doctors offered aggressive treatment, surgery, radiation, chemo. Philip chose it, wanting every possible day. The treatments ravaged him, pain, incontinence, exhaustion. His last 2 years were spent mostly in bed, depressed. He told me near the end, "I wish I'd chosen comfort sooner." Then there's Clara in Dallas, 88, similar diagnosis. Clara opted for palliative care early. She traveled to see grandchildren, hosted dinners, gardened until the end, died peacefully at home, lucid and loved. I've started recording my own stories, memories of teaching during desegregation, the moon landing day in class, David's proposal. Not for money, but for voice. It's what will remain.
The afternoon light is shifting now, turning amber. I've shared the 5 truths, but there are more reflections. Regrets I carry, small acts of rebellion that saved my spirit, and the daily choices that keep me going. We'll continue there. If something stirred you, leave a comment. Tell me, what unspoken words are you carrying, or who might you mentor? I read every one. They make this big house feel less empty. We're pausing here in the middle of the story. There's more to come about spending money on yourself, protecting your peace, and finding joy in ordinary days. The grandfather clock just chimed 5. Time for tea. I'll be back. The grandfather clock has just finished its gentle chime for 5:30, a sound that always reminds me of David winding it every Sunday evening, his sleeves rolled up, humming an old Bing Crosby tune. I've made my tea, Earl Grey with a splash of milk, the way I've taken it since teaching in London for a summer in 1968, and settled back into my chair. The light outside has turned that deep, rosy gold that makes the fog rolling in from the bay look almost magical. I'm glad you're still here with me. We've covered the 5 truths about legacy after 80, but the story isn't finished. There are regrets I still carry, mistakes I made, and the small, everyday choices that have kept joy alive in this old house. Let's continue, shall we? One of the hardest lessons I've learned is this: don't save all your money for your children. Spend it on yourself while you still have the strength to enjoy it. I know how that sounds: selfish, indulgent, even ungrateful. We were raised to sacrifice, to put every extra penny toward the children's future. But I've watched too many friends waste their final years in discomfort just to leave a larger check behind. And I've seen what that money often does to families. Let me tell you about Leonard, a retired architect who lived across the street for 30 years. Leonard and his wife, Esther, were frugal to a fault. They drove the same Buick for 25 years, vacationed at the same modest cabin in the Sierras, clipped coupons religiously, all so their 3 daughters would inherit a substantial estate. Esther passed first, and Leonard kept the promise. When his arthritis made stairs impossible, he refused to install a stair lift, too expensive. When he needed help with meals and bathing, he declined in-home care. "I'll manage." His daughters, busy with careers in Seattle, New York, and Los Angeles, promised to figure something out soon. Leonard ended up in a state-funded facility with shared rooms and lukewarm food. He died at 87, leaving nearly $800,000. The daughters were grateful at first, but within a year they were in court. Arguments over who got the cabin, who deserved more because they'd visited most, who had lent Leonard money years ago. 2 sisters no longer speak. Leonard's careful legacy became a battlefield.
Now, let me tell you about my dear friend Miriam, who taught music at Balboa High for 40 years. Miriam's husband died young, and she raised 2 sons on a teacher's salary. She never had Leonard's wealth, but she had enough. When she turned 80, Miriam made a decision. She sold the big house in the Avenues, bought a cozy cottage in the Mission, and used the difference to live. She hired a gardener so she could enjoy flowers without the bending. She took her sons and grandchildren to New York to see Broadway shows, 3 trips in 5 years. She paid for music lessons for neighborhood kids who couldn't afford them. When her hip gave out, she got the replacement surgery privately, recovered in comfort, and was dancing gently at her 85th birthday. Miriam passed last year at 88 in her own bed with her favorite Chopin playing. Her sons inherited far less than Leonard's daughters, but they inherited memories, photos from Broadway, stories of Grandma Miriam's garden parties, the knowledge that she'd lived fully. At her memorial, the boys hugged and laughed through tears. No lawyers, no resentment, just love. I made the same mistake for a while. After David died, I pinched pennies harder than ever. The boys were doing well. Jonathan with his graphic design firm in Chicago, Thomas with his youth outreach program in Dallas. I thought, they'll need this someday. I wore the same cardigans until they frayed, skipped the new hearing aids because the old ones still worked, turned down invitations to join friends on a cruise because it's extravagant. Then, at 84, I had a scare. A mild stroke that left me dizzy for weeks. Lying in the hospital, I realized I might not have decades left to be sensible. I started spending. I replaced the hearing aids. Suddenly, I could hear the birds again, the full richness of my grandson's voices on the phone. I took Thomas and his family to Washington, D.C., walked the Smithsonian with them, watched their eyes light up the way my students did on field trips. I hired a woman to clean once a week, so I have energy to record these videos and tutor online. My savings are smaller now, but my heart is fuller. The boys tease me gently, "Mom, you're spoiling yourself," and I smile and say, "Exactly, it's my turn." If you're watching and you're still denying yourself small comforts to pad an inheritance, please reconsider. Your children are adults, they'll manage, but you only get one chance at these years. Buy the comfortable shoes, take the trip, hire the help, live with dignity and joy. The money you spend on yourself now becomes part of your legacy too, the example that life is for living. Another lesson I hold close. Protect your peace by cutting ties with people who drain you, even if they share your last name. At 89, your energy is precious. Don't waste it on relationships that leave you diminished.
I learned this the hard way with my sister-in-law, David's younger sister, Louise. Louise lives in Sacramento and has always been difficult. Every phone call was a litany of complaints: her health, her neighbors, the government, and inevitably, subtle digs at how I was handling David's estate, raising the boys, spending my time in retirement. After David passed, the calls became weekly guilt trips. David would want you to visit more. You seem to have plenty of time for your little hobbies. I'd hang up exhausted, questioning myself. For years, I endured it out of loyalty to David's memory. Then, at 86, I stopped answering every call. I'd respond by email when I felt up to it, short and kind. Louise was furious, told the family I'd gone cold in my old age. Some relatives agreed, she's family, Margaret. But I felt lighter than I had in decades. The dread was gone. I started sleeping better, laughing more. I redirected that energy into mentoring and recording family stories. I saw the opposite with my neighbor Carlos, 85, a retired firefighter. Carlos had a cousin who only called when he needed money, car repairs, rent, just until payday. Carlos always helped out of family duty. It drained his savings and his spirit. Finally, after a big loan went unpaid, Carlos said no more. The cousin cut contact. Carlos grieved for a month, then joined a veterans support group, started woodworking, made toys for the children's hospital. He told me last Christmas, saying no to him was saying yes to me. Best decision I made. You've spent a lifetime being the peacemaker, the helper, the one who shows up. At our age, you're allowed boundaries. Politely, firmly, lovingly if possible, but boundaries nonetheless. Your peace is part of your legacy too. And here's something that brings me joy every day. Be a little bit bad. Stop trying to be the perfect elder. Stop saying yes when your heart says no. Stop worrying about being polite at the expense of your comfort. I was always the good teacher, the good wife, the good mother, always accommodating. After 80, I got tired of it. Now, if I don't want to attend a lengthy family Zoom call, I don't. I send a cheerful message instead. Sending love, enjoy the call. If someone serves food I don't like, I don't force it down with a smile. I politely decline. If I want to stay in my pajamas until noon reading novels, I do. My daughter-in-law once teased, "Mrs. Ellie, you've become a rebel." I laughed and said, "About time." My friend Beatrice, 87, took this to heart beautifully. She stopped going to her alumni association lunches. Too much gossip, too many complaints. Instead, she spends afternoons painting watercolors of the bay. Her daughter worried at first. "Mom, people will talk." Beatrice replied, "Let them. I'm finally living for me." She's happier than I've ever seen her, and her paintings are lovely. Being bad isn't about being unkind. It's about honoring your own needs after decades of honoring everyone else's. Eat dessert first sometimes. Skip the event that bores you. Speak your mind gently but honestly. You've earned the right to be a little selfish, a little stubborn, a little eccentric. The people who love you will adjust. The ones who don't, well, that tells you something. There's one more lesson I want to share before I close, and it's perhaps the most important. Keep learning, keep growing, keep curious. The day you decide you're too old to try something new is the day a part of you starts to fade. I started this channel at 88, terrified of the camera, fumbling with the microphone. My grandson patiently taught me. Now I love it, reading your comments, hearing how a story helped someone say I'm sorry or mentor a young person. I take online courses through the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. Last semester, it was poetry of the Beat Generation. This semester, it's astronomy.
I'm awful at remembering constellation names, but I love gazing at the stars from my backyard and feeling small in the best way. My former student, now Dr. Angela Chen, came to visit last month. She's a physicist at Berkeley. We sat on the porch, and she showed me photos from the James Webb Telescope. I was spellbound. At 89, I'm still a student. It keeps my mind sharp and my heart open.
I think back to the teacher I was at 30, certain I knew everything. How I wish I could tell her to stay humble, stay curious. But I tell you instead, it's never too late to learn. Read the book you've been putting off. Try the recipe. Ask the young person to show you their music. Curiosity is the fountain of youth we actually have access to. The fog has rolled in fully now, softening the city lights into gentle halos. The clock strikes 7. I've talked longer than I planned, but there's something comforting about sharing these stories with you. They make the house feel less empty, less final. If anything I've said resonated, please leave a comment. Tell me one word you need to speak, one young person you might mentor, or one small way you'll be bad this week. I read every single one, and they light up my days. This brings us to the end of my story, for tonight at least. Before I go, remember what I want on my gravestone. Be kind, do good, be loyal. Not the places I went or the money I left, but how I treated people, how I loved, how I showed up. Thank you for sitting with me in this quiet house. You've made it feel warmer. Now go live well. Speak the words. Mentor generously. Forgive freely. Spend joyfully. Protect your peace. Be curious. Love deeply. You're running out of time. We all are. Make it count.